You're listening to the Bahá'í World News Service.
Now live at local house of worship.
During recent consultations at the Bahá'í World Centre on the development of Baha'i communities, a few attendees who work closely with Bahá'í Houses of Worship in Uganda and Kenya sat with the news service to share their perspectives and insights about how these temples are enriching community life.
My name is Samuel Mwangi. I come from Kenya, and it's about 2-3 years from when the local house of worship in Matunda Soy was dedicated. And so it's an interesting conversation that I'm looking forward to having around what a house of worship is, how it engenders the aspects of worship and service, and maybe dissect that a little bit more.
And my name is Patricia Odiambo Senoga from Uganda. Very, very happy to be at the World Centre and also be part of such an amazing conversation.
And I am Charles Anglin from Uganda, and I live near a house of worship. A house of worship is a place that belongs to the community. It's a place where people come to meet and gather and to collaborate. And it's a place where people come to think about how to serve their communities or to address the needs of their community. And it's also a place where people come to pray together and to seek assistance from their Creator.
The house of worship, we see there's the central edifice or the main building that is dedicated to the worship of God. And so when people come in, it's open to everyone. When people come in, then they go in to pray and to meditate. And in the house of worship, then it's not a place where you come to have meetings. You can have those in other buildings around it, but within the house of worship itself, within the central edifice, this is dedicated to the worship of God. And it's where the souls, all we as humans, can communicate with our Creator. It's a place where you can have that connection, but it doesn't mean that is the only place where we can pray and meditate. There are many communities in the world where we do not have our house of worship. But that spirit of the house of worship finds expression when we meet in our homes, we invite friends, and we come together and say prayers together. We reflect on the holy writings together. And then in these settings, then we can also be able to start reflecting on some of the problems around us.
So you just reminded me, we're talking about this aspect of carrying the spirit of the house of worship to even communities that don't necessarily have the structure. So there's this experience in one community. So this is a community that has very close families together, different families. But there was an interaction issue for some reason, and some of them were even generational. You don't know why you're not working with your neighbor or friends with your neighbor, but it's because of your auntie or your uncle from the previous generation. I don't know. There was this thing carried on for no good reason. But it was very interesting. Always the children, cut across these differences. They always play together. But for some reason, the adults could not associate. So then when the concept of this community buildings, worship and service, started to, should I say, embrace this village where these families were, I remember initially the idea was to have prayers to come together. And there was one person at the forefront really trying to hold conversations with different families and saying, let's gather at this home. And, some of the friends would be like, is it in that person's home? And you'll be like, I'm not coming, I cannot attend that.
Yeah.
Okay, but there was a bit of, back and forth and reflection or so. How do we assist these friends overcome, these kinds of unhealthy relationships? So, but the devotional space went on. And one thing we have also learned about these spaces of prayer or, delving into the creative word of God is they are portals of growth. So given from the meaningful conversation that unfolds, there is a lot that can, should I say, manifest into service. So one of the things that came out from that space as different families started to pray together was thinking about how can we systematically build our own capacity to be able to serve our own communities. And so there's this material, called Reflections on the Life of the Spirit that they decided to take time to go through. So it was very interesting for this one home where the lady refused to attend because her fellow lady and in-law is attending. So when the ladies gathered, they gathered right in the compound. And these homes were really close. But they would gather in the compound to go through this material. And so she would see all of them quite engaged in it. And she really wants to be part of, but it's the relation, she has this hindrance. So she would always just sit, outside and just listen. But she's not part of it. She's just listening.
Yeah.
And then slowly every day she just, gets a little closer. And I think at one point she's like, I think she reflected and said, I really love the conversations unfolding and I would really love to be part of this. So she showed up, and she said, I want to be part of that. As they engage in this material, there's a lot of topics they engage with, thinking about how do you relate with your neighbor, concepts of why it's important to be truthful, why it's important to, to pray together. Yeah. And you would find that even when they gave examples, the examples were always among each other. Just like this person is not truthful or this other person, animals came to my garden and ate my crops, such things. But very interesting. By the time they almost completed this material that they were going through, the attitudes drastically changed. And you could literally see the transformation and the harmony now. When you find, it was actually mainly the women from these families that really had the opportunity to attend consistently. But when you see the harmony and the friendship today, you almost don't believe the story before because they're so close together and they're always thinking about the well-being of each other. And I remember there was another experience when one of them got really sick at night. And it was the other women in the neighborhood that, gathered the resources to ensure that they assisted her to get to the hospital. That wouldn't have happened, a few months back, really. They wouldn't even have been aware that one of them was not well. But to see that bringing, this spirit of the house of worship closer and closer to the communities can have such a greater impact on the relationships of families, of individuals. So it's just such a beautiful transformation to see. Yeah. And so, of course, it didn't stop with them. Once they could see or feel and be part of that transformation, then they wanted to replicate this in their own village. So then they started to hold these conversations with their friends. So we saw that naturally grow. And the number of friends who now attend the devotions has grown. And then on one point, the men started to ask, so when are we having the men gatherings? So now they felt like they were being left behind, but now they are also part of those efforts. So yeah, that's a beautiful experience.
Are they still left behind?
No, no, they are not. No, they are not. So now it's more now like the family unit, trying to move that. So now we see the children having their own gatherings, exploring about this spiritual education and these qualities that are essential for their own growth. We see the younger generation of youth also doing the same, but to see their own parents also at the forefront of this and trying to see that they overcome all those misunderstandings and really deciding that at the end of it all, love and harmony is the way forward.
I'm curious if Charles, you could talk a little bit more about the design. You mentioned how friends ask, why are you building these beautiful structures? If you could talk a little bit more about this in the context of Uganda.
I think when we think about the House of Worship as a place that belongs to everyone, whether it's children, youth, men and women, and it becomes like a home for the community. And it's a place where as they meet together and they consult together or talk together and pray together, then new patterns of life begin to emerge. So, for example, if you think about the children and the way they're treated in society, and usually they are invisible at the House of Worship in Kampala, as part of the program for prayers, the children are invited to come up to the front and say their prayers, and it really helps them see how they can contribute to the community, in spite of their size or their age. And in many ways, it builds on a culture that we have in society. So, for example, in Uganda, they say that when children beat a drum, then the adults dance. Mm-hmm. And it helps us think about how different segments of our communities are all part of this community and what they bring to this community, and how the House of Worship is that place where all of this comes together. Maybe another example is from Kenya, where recently they had... a few days ago, they had a gathering for over 300 elderly people above the age of 60. Yeah. And the reason the community organized this space was to really appreciate the elderly. And again, this is an aspect of culture in which we think about those who have come before us and who have laid the foundation. On which we stand, and to appreciate their contribution and to be conscious that they are just because they are elderly doesn't mean they no longer have something to give. So in this idea that the House of Worship brings together every segment of society, every stage of life, and really to begin to think about how each and every one of us can contribute to this process of working together, as opposed to doing things in isolation. Yeah.
The design of the House of Worship reflects what is all fits in with the environment and fits in with the culture of the people. So, for example, in many African communities, people would gather around a tree, under a tree, and pray. And to this day, there are certain trees that are protected for this reason. Maybe you could say something about that around the house of worship in Kampala or the one in Kenya.
So in Kenya, there is this fig tree that the community always used to meet around, and the house of worship was built next to it. And similarly, in Uganda, we also have this large tree in front of the house of worship that was there before the house of worship, and people would come to meet under it, but also to pray. And I think this is sort of a reflection of this need of human beings to connect. But they need a place where they can meet and connect.
Yeah.
And it is a place where they feel comfortable. It's a place that is beautiful, and the houses of worship are an expression of that place. And they are designed to fit as naturally and harmonize as naturally as possible in the landscape. So, for example, in Uganda, the colors and the shape make the house of worship resemble a hut, which is very much in keeping with the structures in which people live in Africa.
Yeah.
So in many ways, the house of worship can take different forms. It can be a building, such as the ones that have been built. It can be a tree under which people gather. It can express itself in a home in which people come together to meet, to pray, and to think about how can we contribute to the needs of our community. So, and as people meet and pray together and work together, then a new pattern of life begins to take shape. So people begin to get to know each other better, to build stronger bonds of friendship, to get to understand the different challenges that they are facing as individuals, as families, as communities, and to think about how do we work together to overcome these challenges. So maybe, for example, in certain communities, there's the access to education is not so straightforward. So a community or a family or a group of people might begin to think about how do we educate our children. And so the house of worship serves as that place where they can think about these things.
Then we've talked about prayer in the central edifice, which stands out. And I think you see this in every house of worship, dedicated towards service, towards how we serve the common good. We do things that help the communities from which we come. And there's some examples from Uganda around this idea of service around the house of worship, and how that is reinforcing our understanding of service in our own communities, in our own neighborhoods.
I think maybe a question that's closely related to that is what is service? Why is service so important to our development as human beings? What is it about service that brings out the best in us? And I think when you do something for somebody else without expecting anything back, then in many ways you're giving a part of yourself, and you are strengthening that relationship. It's an expression of love. So it is a way in which as human beings we can grow and develop.
Yeah.
Without service, there is no way we can grow and develop. Through this process, all these qualities that define who we are as human beings are true nature and purpose. For example, patience. You have to be patient when you're serving with others, because we're all at different stages in our lives and different stages of growth and development. Or when you think about generosity means you give wholeheartedly. You don't give because you expect something in return. So service is an expression of generosity. When you think about developing our knowledge, our understanding through acts of service, we begin to think about how do we do things differently, and by doing it together, we begin to develop these qualities together. And so then this creates a different way of or a different pattern of life, as opposed to one in which we try to do everything as individuals. Yes. the house of worship is this place where we begin this journey of learning what it means to build community, and it is dedicated to that purpose. There really hasn't been any other place in society where everyone is welcome and is encouraged to come and think about how do we contribute to the well-being of everyone. And so the House of Worship is unique in that sense, and it has provided that platform, and it as we have discussed, it finds expression in many ways. It could be a tree, it could be a home, it could be, but at the end of the day, it is a conscious effort to think about how do we learn about what it means to build community and to help each other and to love and to serve and to be generous and to pray.
You're listening to the Baha'i World News Service. For more information, visit news.baha'i.org.